Hello, everyone. We'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to enter in. Here we go. Everyone's flooding in. Give you guys a couple of minutes just to enter in. If you've just arrived, we'll take a couple of minutes, and if you haven't had a little toilet break or want to get a glass of water or something, please feel free. We'll start in a couple of minutes after everyone's filtered in. If you're just joining us, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes just to filter in. So feel free to have a toilet break or grab a glass of water. Okay, we'll give ourselves another 30 seconds or so. Get any late joiners in, and then we'll begin. Brilliant. It looks like numbers might have stabilized. Oh, I say that a few more people have just joined, so we will begin then, as we'll be here all day. Okay, yes. So welcome to our Digital Care Hub Cyber Game for Social Care webinar. So I'm Daniel O'Shaughnessy. I'm the head of program delivery for Digital Care Hub. I'm also joined by Claire Howarth. Say hi, Claire.
Hi.
Who's our projects and policy manager. We'll be talking to you today about the cyber game that we've developed. Hopefully get a bit of excitement for it. There we go. So first, housekeeping. Don't worry, you're all on mute. You can't be seen. So if you're currently having a few biscuits or whatever it might be, nobody can see you eating them. I'm not judging you. I like biscuits too. Please use the Q&A function if you have any questions. If you're not sure where the Q&A function is, if you're on a laptop, you might have to go to the top of the screen and then hit more or the little three dots. And the same is true if you're on a phone or a tablet. You can tap the screen to see the controls, choose more, and then Q and A. When it comes to any questions that we can't answer or anything we're not sure about, we will come back to you. If you can add your email into the Q&A, that's really helpful for us in being able to come back to you. And the webinar itself will last no longer than an hour. I don't expect it to last a full hour. It might depend on how much discussion we have with some of the questions. And afterwards, you will get access to the recording of this webinar and also the presentation, including all of the links. So please don't panic if there's something on there. Don't feel you've got to write everything down. You will get the slides afterwards. So without further ado, if I click into that. So for Digital Care Hub, first, a bit of context of who are we. If you're not aware, we're an independent consortium. We're a not-for-profit nationally. We're led by care providers, and we do everything we do is aimed towards care providers in England. So the consortium is it consists of the national trade associations. It's service agnostic, so we don't target particular types of services, and we're here to work with all care providers. Now, being Digital Care Hub, we obviously focus on technology. So we work with care providers who are adopting technology, tech suppliers, organizations who represent people who draw upon care, commissioners, regulators, CQC, etc. We also work with a couple of government departments, so the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, the Department for Health and Social Care. We help try and influence policy and feedback what you guys say up to government. What do we do? So, as I say, we support adult social care providers, mainly around digital technology, so both implementation side of things, understanding how and why and what some of the pitfalls are. We write quite a lot of free guidance. And especially we look at how you adopt technology safely. So that's cybersecurity side of things. We also represent care providers' interests in a variety of different ways. And we host a few different programs funded by government. So this one is the Cyber Resilient Care Program, which this cyber game is part of. And that's funded by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. We host the Better Security, Better Care Program, which is funded by the Department for Health and Social Care. And we also act as a subject matter expert to the government's Digitising Social Care Programme, which is funded by NHS England. Really important thing at the bottom there is to say pretty much all of our material is open source, so we use what's called the government open license. So if you ever see any of our policies and procedures or training guidance, etc., it's all free. Please use it. The only way you could sort of contravene that license is if you try and use it for any sort of commercial gain. But as long as you're using it for your organization, totally fine. Please use it. That's what it's there for. So the context around the cyber game, it's been developed by us in Digital Care Hub, and it's part of our Cyber Resilient Care Programme funded by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. So really, for a bit of transparency, we wanted to show you what does this program consist of. So yes, the cyber game is a part of it, but what else are we doing as part of that program? So we've run a series of interactive cyber attack webinars, which basically and we'll get to experience this a little bit later, but we use Zoom polls to try and figure out, okay, what do we do in the middle of a cyber attack? What would we do as a group? And kind of what our actions result in. We have run a series of in-depth cyber workshops and vulnerability assessments. So they're called tabletop exercises. So it's a bit of a, the best way to describe it is it's a bit of a way to run through a cyber incident, a what if scenario, if you like. And we've been running those in the Northwest, West Midlands, and Southwest. And of course, we'll have a final report presented back to participants, to a couple of government departments. We will also try and make as much of the final report public as we can. Obviously, there'll be things in there that'll be quite sensitive around technical vulnerabilities for our sector, so we don't want that to get in the wrong hands. That sort of thing may well be removed or redacted from anything public, but we always try and share as much as possible back to the sector. And finally, the part of this, which is most relevant to this webinar, is we propose the Choose Your Own Adventure gamified cybersecurity tool, which we've now shortened to Cyber Game, because that's a much happier way of calling it. And it'll be hosted on the Digital Care Hub website. In fact, I think it's actually live right now. So why did we go with a cyber game? And previously, as Digital Care Hub, we've developed 2 data and cybersecurity e-learning modules specifically aimed at our sector. They've proven to be really popular, but they focus on the awareness raising and the prevention side of things. So what do we need to have in place and what do we need to understand to prevent a data breach, to prevent a cyber attack, and so on? The cyber game really looks at what happens in the middle of an incident. So if we're put into somebody's shoes, a registered manager's shoes, for example, during an incident, what sort of decisions do you have to make? What's the real life scenario you would find yourself in? So it takes us that one step further from prevention to actual decision making in a cyber incident. Second part on this, why a cyber game? Emphasis on game. Cyber can be quite dry. I'm sure we've all done that, like maybe around 2016 or so. You get given a big pamphlet or a big load of a big stack of folders that are like, right now you need to learn GDPR. It can be really dry and really difficult to go through, especially if people use a lot of technical language. We've tried to avoid as much of that as possible and just allow people to understand, okay, in a cyber incident, here are the real life choices and consequences that will happen. And in order to be transparent as a national not-for-profit, it fits with all of our values, it fits with the digital innovation skills and cyber side of things. And the main aim, like all learning, I think it should be interactive, it should be somewhat fun, and it should be easy to navigate. And we've also put it as a team or alone. I'll go into that a little bit later, but it's something that you can have or use as a group or individually. Specifically looking at the cyber game itself, if you, the best analogy I can find is if you remember those kind of 1980s, 1990s choose your own adventure novels where it says, choose option A and go to page 87 if that's what you chose. Option B, go to page 14. That's sort of what the tool does behind the scenes. Obviously, for interacting with the tool, it just gives us 4 options. And it really walks you through what are some of the controls you should have in place? What are some decisions that you might make? What are some consequences of those decisions? And what does that mean for your organization and for you personally going forwards? Again, it tries to do it in a safe environment and make it really interactive and fun rather than a sort of dry, piece of learning that just asks you, what is ransomware? What is phishing? Can you select the correct definition? No, this is very much a scenario that's based around, okay, what is the correct decision? And often, actually, there might not be a correct decision, and we'll go on to that shortly. So what's it useful for? Obviously, it's a way to learn about cybersecurity and data protection. It's free, and we would recommend combine it with something else. So use this as a fun way to kind of break up a training session. So if you're getting people to do the e-learning modules that we've produced on data protection, break those up with a cyber game. You know, if you've got someone who comes in and does cybersecurity training or data protection training, break some of that up with a cyber game. Doing it as a group can be much more fun way of interacting with the topic than essentially just having it all laid out on paper at once. So we put the learning outcomes there. So particularly for anyone who might be a training manager, or if you're a registered manager who does have a training manager, we're really looking at the practical importance of cybersecurity. So again, not the academic side of it, the practical side of what decisions do you need to make on a day-to-day basis, either when something potential happens, when a near miss happens, or when you're in the middle of a cyber incident. We're going to learn how to respond. So that's the important differential, the difference between the e-learning and this cyber game, as this looks at how we respond effectively to a cyber incident. It'll improve our decision-making skills. I know that sounds like a bit of a generic thing, but actually we discovered this in some of the webinars too, is when you lay things out for people and say, you're in the middle of a cyber incident, something happens, do we A, do all of the correct things, or B, put our head in the sand and kind of ignore the problem? Everybody in theory chooses A, but sometimes in practice people do B. And so running through some of those scenarios time and time again, it actually gives you that intuition to say, well, okay, I might go into a panic and pick B, but actually we all know A is the correct solution. We've done this before. We've practiced this. It allows you to enhance your knowledge. And importantly, it gives you this suite of links and resources that we've assembled, and we'll go on to this a little bit later. It's not the full it's not every link to everything on Digital Care Hub. We can't fit that into in one slide, but it is the most important things that will be relevant to this game. So, how do we play? The first thing is about accessing the scenario. So, how do we even get there? So, if you go onto Digital Care Hub website, digitalcarehub.co.uk, navigate down to the e-learning section, and you'll see there'll be a cyber game module. When you go into that, you'll see a landing page. You'll see some images, and a little button that says Let's Play or How to Play. You click the Let's Play. It'll take you through. Now, the only real important technical thing to note is that you can't save your progress, but if you refresh the page or you close it and come back to it, it will prompt you to either resume the scenario or restart the game completely. So you can save it in that respect. And when you do get the slides, we've put a little link there that will take you through to the full user guide. So once you've clicked on and you've said, yep, let's play, takes us through to character selection mode. And Claire will walk this through with us a little bit later. But basically it helps us to prompt, or it prompts us, I should say, to select one of three characters. So a registered manager, a data protection lead, and a frontline carer. And we wanted to find sort of the three most important perspectives within an organization. You've got your registered manager, as I'm sure many of you will be, who is spinning 150 plates and only ever has capacity for 100 of them. So how do you balance, yes, the security with actually keeping everything going? Then there's the data protection policy lead or officer, who's really only concerned about, okay, what are the legalities on this side of things? Yes, it's really important we keep the organization going. But actually, my most important thing from my point of view is we make sure we obey all of the rules and all of the laws around this, and we stay compliant. And then from the carer's point of view, obviously, trying to make sure that they deliver frontline care whilst also staying safe. So you can see the different balances, and we've tried to pull out a different scenario for each, which allows you to walk through and really feel that experience. The other thing we've put at the bottom there is we strongly do encourage everyone to play through all three characters. So if you're a registered manager, yes, of course, play through your role, and play through your data protection lead role, because if you're a smaller organization, you will probably hold that hat at the same time as being a registered manager. But also either walk through the carer scenario yourself, or even get a few of your frontline staff and ask them to walk through the scenario with you. They might actually surprise you with some of the decisions they'll make. You'll get hit with a series of 4 questions for each one. Sorry, a question with a series of 4 answers. And when you've picked the answer that's relevant for you, or that you think is the best choice for you, you'll be given some immediate feedback. Now, that feedback will tell us 2 things, really. It will give us a score for each of our sort of categories, and we'll look at those in a second. But it will also give you a bit of information about some of the real life implications. And why we've chosen some of those. So for this example, we've said, how do you make sure service user files are kept secure? We chose tell everyone to be careful, but keep them in an easily accessible and unlocked cabinet. So it's ranked us on security, time, and cost. And it lets us know, for example, that for time, staff are still burdened with paper records, but they do have easy access to them. But it ranks us a little bit higher on time, lower on security, because obviously it's much easier for unauthorized people to access the files. And again, because we want these to be fairly quick to understand and non-technical, we kept these to a sentence or 2 rather than kind of 4 or 5 paragraphs that would be quite difficult to work through if you don't have the time. And when you get to the end, you'll get a score. So we didn't want to give anyone kind of an overall single score, but we wanted to break it down to those 3 categories. Now, the thing I've bolded there is there is no perfect score. Sure, in an academic sense, you could probably walk away and say, well, in theory, you want to get maximum security, lowest time, and lowest cost. And you still want to try and achieve those, but we've made it intentionally that there isn't a perfect score. If you go for more security, it will cost you more time or more cost, or both. If you decide to go with low security, it's going to cost you, and it may actually cost you a lot of time as well. To try and sort of reflect those real life scenarios where you can't always balance things, and ultimately all 3 of these are an existential threat to your organization. So if you have poor security, that's a threat to your organization. If this incident affects you so much that your time is gone, you're not going to be able to deliver frontline care, which means your organization effectively stops delivering care, which is the death of your organization in some ways. And if the cost becomes so much that you become bankrupt, again, the organization stops functioning. So it's about getting a really healthy balance of security, time, and cost. And the final slide there is around resources, and you'll see that after you get to the end of the game. The important thing, we've probably balanced this more towards registered managers and data protection leads than we have towards frontline carers, purely because those 2 roles have more control over the organization, policies and procedures, and so on. I'd probably recommend for the frontline carers having something for them, something that points towards the various resources you use internally. So if they do see something that looks like a strange email, or if they think they've clicked on something they shouldn't have, how do they report that? It'd be useful to send that alongside the game, especially if you're doing that training at the time. All of this is free. Please use all of it. Again, it's all open to be used. Probably important again to reiterate, this is only a small amount of the resources we have as the Dual Care Hub. If you go onto the website, you'll find plenty more, but these were the things that we thought, if we pick these out and curate these, they're probably the most relevant things to the scenarios that we've picked out. So we've walked a little bit through the game. So what's the best way of using it? And Claire will do a bit of a demo for us in a second, and we'll actually get to play along together. But how should we utilize it? So, it's completely free to use. So regardless if you want to use it in training, induction, supervisions, team meetings, back to basics, I couldn't think of anything else to put into that list. But if you've got something as part of your organization that you use, yes, definitely utilize it, incorporate it into what you do. And then a little tip that we've kind of found out is find out who best navigates the scenarios and start to include them in who might do your business continuity plan. For example, if you find there's a particular person in your senior leadership team who does really well, seems to take to this, seems to find it really intuitively obvious, or just really enjoys this side of it, you might want to have them sit aside and say, okay, what's in your business continuity plan? Can you have a look over this? Do you want to take ownership of some of these items? And they become the person who develops that and you okay it. It's a really easy way of kind of beginning to filter out who has an interest in this and who therefore might either be good at it or have the potential to be quite good at this. I think I might have whizzed through that one for you, Claire, to give us a bit of time. But that's where we get to if I stop sharing the cyber game demo.
Brilliant, thanks, Dan. So what I'm going to teach you how to do is how to actually navigate the game, and we're actually going to play through one of the scenarios as well. So once you've clicked on that link on the website, we're going to be seeing this page here, and we're just going to click onto Let's Play. So as we know, the game simulates those real-world cybersecurity challenges faced by adult social care providers. As a recap, if you haven't played for this before, we have the link here on how to play, and we know that the exercise is scored based on those three factors that Dan mentioned, those being security, time and cost, and it goes into these in a bit more detail. So for security, how well that choice protects sensitive information, it prevents further risks and ensures compliance with regulations. For time, how quickly that response allows care and services to continue, and a fast decision may keep those things running smoothly, but it might sacrifice security, leading to bigger problems down the line. And for cost, the financial or resource burden of the decision. That low-cost approach might seem really appealing in the short term, but if it doesn't properly resolve the issue, you might face legal fines or reputational damage later on. So when you're playing through and you're looking through all of the answers, you need to be making a balance of those three. So if I click on to continue, it takes us back to this page, and we're going to say that we're ready and we're going to begin. So this is the page where we're going to select our character. So we have our registered manager, our data security and protection lead, and our carer. So for this walkthrough, we're going to select the registered manager. As soon as you've clicked on one of those people, it gives you the incident. So basically a little short story about what's happened. This one says that an employee in your care organisation has accidentally sent a service user's detailed care plan to the wrong recipients via email. That document contains highly sensitive information, and it includes medical conditions, emergency contacts and care preferences. Those recipients may include people outside of your organisation. That could be family members, other service users, or external professionals. And if the wrong person were to read that information, it could cause emotional distress to the service user, damage trust in your organisation, and lead to legal or regulatory issues if not handled correctly. So once you've read through the incident and you're happy with it, select continue, and it moves us on to this first page of questions. If when you're reading through the questions, you're not sure of any of the words, we do have a glossary here. So you can click onto that, look up the word that you're not sure about, read the information below it. And then if you click continue, it will take you back to the instant questions. And if you need a reminder of what the incident is, we also have the link just here, and you can read through that again. So what Dan's going to help me with now is actually working through the question. So how do you ensure that staff minimize the risk of sending sensitive information to the wrong participants? 4 options: implement a simple rule, always double check the recipient before sending sensitive emails, but don't change anything else. Option B, restrict all email communication of sensitive data and require staff to use secure portals or in-person transfers. C, assume staff will be careful and handle data responsibly without formal rules or training. Or option D, implement regular staff training and enforce email security measures, e.g. no password sharing, turning on multi-factor authentication. So if you wouldn't mind just voting on which one of those you'd want, A, B, C or D, I'll give you a minute just to make a decision, and then Dan will let me know which of those 4 options has been the most popular. Dan, I think Molly's raised her hand. Do you want to maybe see whether you're able to invite her in, or whether Molly could maybe put a question in the Q&A box?
Yes, let me scroll scroll through. Oh, Molly said she pressed it by accident. That's
Oh,
okay, Molly.
no problem at all. I'll just give you another 30 seconds just to make your choice, and then we'll click on it and see what the answers come up with. Okay, does it look like we've got a strong winner there, Dan?
Yes, it looks like we have. Yep. So we've got 62% have voted for D.
Okay.
And just for reference, 30% B, 8% A.
Okay, so when we select our answer, we would just click on the one that we think, and it will take us to a bit of a feedback page just here. So remembering that question, how do you ensure staff minimize the risk of sending sensitive information to the wrong recipients? We chose to implement regular staff training and enforce email security measures, e.g. no password sharing, turning on multi-factor authentication. So do you remember we said that we were going to score all of the answers? You can see the score that it's given you in this top right hand corner. And every time you answer a question, it will add your score from the previous questions. So you'll get a full score at the end. But you can see for this one that we've got security was scored 3. That's quite high because it reduces the risk by actively improving staff awareness and adding IT safeguards. For time, it's a moderate score because it requires regularly scheduling training for all of the staff and implementing IT changes and updates, and a moderate cost for 2 as well because it requires investment into IT and training materials. So overall, we've got a balance of scores. I think that's a great answer that you've chosen there. So when you're happy with that feedback, you'll click on to continue, and it moves us on to the next question. So it's talking about your initial reaction. What do you do when you first heard about this incident? Option A, instruct the sender to record the email and wait to see if anyone else responds before taking further steps. B, ignore it. Maybe it will go away on its own, or it's somebody else's responsibility. C, investigate quietly yourself to confirm the breach before notifying anyone else. Or D, follow your organisation's policy for data breaches and report the incident immediately to the appropriate person or team. So again, if you could just vote for this one. Looking like a really strong response for this one.
I think everyone seems to prefer D on this one. One person come for A.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Shall I end the poll?
I think so. I think we've got a clear winner on this one, haven't we? Okay, so we're going to select option D. So followed the organisation's policy for data breaches and report the incident immediately to the appropriate person or team. So again, we've got a high score for security because we've adhered to that official policy, and that's going to help us contain the breach and make sure that we are complying with any legal obligations. Time is moderate because we do need to spend time organising a response to this, and a little bit of cost, but that's mostly just on admin, so time taken by you or a manager. And you see that the scores are ticking up in the top right hand corner, adding the first 2 questions together. So managing the fallout. So you've had that initial shock, you've had your initial actions. What are you going to do about it now? We're going to think about how we're going to communicate the situation to the staff within our organisation and also the wider public as well. So our first option, downplay the incident, avoid notifying the ICO because it might not lead to any significant harm. B, wait until the investigation is complete before informing anyone, and that will avoid any unnecessary panic. Option C, notify the service user and their family about the breach and offer them support. Then follow your policy to determine whether to report it to the ICO. Or D, ignore it. It's likely someone else's responsibility to handle it. As Dan mentioned before, that's your head in the sand option. If we want to vote on this one, please.
Or as otherwise we might think the correct option, right, guys? We just put our hand in the sand. We joke, but legitimately, some people, it's difficult when you're in a situation you haven't been trained for, you've not practiced the situation. It is easy to just stick your head in the sand, and especially you have another 55 different problems to deal with that day.
Yeah, it's that freeze response, isn't it, Dan? So you don't know
Mm.
what to do. So doing nothing seems like the safest thing to do. But actually, you do need to be making choices about how you handle these types of situations.
Well, it looks like we have a clear winner for this one as well, and it's not D, it's
It's
C.
not. It's C this time. Okay, I think we have another strong response there. So we're going to notify the service user and their family about the breach and offer them some support. And then we're going to follow our policy that we should have in place already to determine whether we're going to report it to the Information Commissioner's office or not. Again, we've got a really good security score because we've encouraged timely action by those affected, and we're also meeting that legal obligation for notifications to the ICO as well. Yes, it's going to take a little bit of time because we need to coordinate communication, and we might have to fill out that report on the ICO website as well. And there's some administrative costs, staff time to contact families, and to write up any necessary documents as well. Okay, so all of our initial steps have been carried out, and now we want to limit any damage to our reputation and to our organisation. How are we going to minimise the risk of any harm? So option A would be to quickly assess who received that email, ask them to delete it, and follow up with an internal review. B, ask the sender to send up a follow-up email asking recipients to ignore the previous message. Option C, assume that email won't cause much harm and move on. And option D, immediately bring in legal and IT experts to assess risks and report the incident formally. So just to mention, obviously most people on the call are getting the best balanced answers. If you were to select one of the other ones, it would give you guidance as to where you've maybe fallen a bit short. So something might be a really small initial cost, but then it might lead to a much bigger cost later on. So if you choose to do nothing and the situation gets worse and worse, you might think the initial outlay in terms of finances is small, but actually you end up with a much bigger problem. So it will give you guidance in the feedback if you've chosen one of those less optimal choices. So it will kind of help you to learn as you go along. Okay, so we've got a bit more of an even split between
Mm.
options A and options D this time. So either quickly assess who received the email, ask them to delete it and follow up with an internal review, or immediately bring in legal and IT experts to assess the risks and report the incident formally. We do have a slight preference for option D, so we'll go ahead and choose that one. So we know that the data breach has happened. We're trying to minimize the risk of any harm, and we've chosen to bring in those legal and IT experts. So security, that's the best response in terms of security. We've got that high score of 3, and it's a thorough response. The time, yes, it might take a little bit of time for you to actually contact them and bring them in, but then it's passed on the responsibility in terms of time. You're paying for that expert to come in, and they're going to be able to handle it much more efficiently than you are without that technical knowledge. 3, yeah, it's going to have a high cost because you're having to pay somebody outside your organization to do it. It ensures compliance, but avoids that legal trouble. But as I was mentioning before, if you don't do anything and the situation continues to get worse, then that cost may escalate even further. So it might be a case of spend some now to avoid paying more later. So this is after the big initial furora's kind of passed and you're wanting to move forward, lessons learned, and prevent any further breaches. And you want to put some changes into place to avoid similar incidents happening in the future. Option A tells us to ignore it, assume that staff will be more careful if something went wrong next time. Next one, ask staff to double check emails before sending, but don't invest in additional training or tools. Option C, prohibit staff from sending emails with sensitive information altogether. Option D, provide targeted training on data handling and invest in secure email measures, things like encryption and doing automatic checks. So Dan, if you want to just launch the poll for that one.
Yeah, and important to say we've obviously picked these options because we've seen these options, all of them.
Yep.
And it's a totally human response. It doesn't mean someone's a bad person, a bad manager. It's a totally normal thing, as Claire said. There's an almost freeze response. There's a clamp down response that people often fall into. Where you say, right, that's it, no more emails ever. Okay, fine, that solves the problem, but it doesn't. It creates other problems for your organization elsewhere. Um, so far, 100% of you have gone for D.
You're all too good at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things like that option C, prohibit staff from sending emails, that would be really high on security because you wouldn't ever run into this problem. But we know that that's not going to be a practical response. We still need to be delivering care. We still need to be able to communicate with people. So some of these are ones where we wouldn't expect you to choose them, but it just would give you some feedback about why that would be the wrong option. And if you even wanted to play through the game another time and choose all the wrong answers, and you can see the feedback for those ones as well.
Probably also important to say that depending on, I'll close the poll there, depending on the size of your organization and what your priorities are, that may change. If you're an organization that knows you have, I don't know where that organization would be in social care right now, but if you're someone who has a lot of resources and lots of spare time, that may be something you're willing to sacrifice for even more security. Whereas if you're someone that already has a lot of the right things in place security wise, it may not be um, that much of a concern for cost, or if you're really short on resources, you might want to prioritize cost over time, for example.
Okay, so everybody chose this option D. Scores really highly on the security. It does address the human error through training and strengthen the security with the tools. A little bit of time because you've got to schedule in those training sessions, implement the new tools, and there might be some like printing costs or might need to hire a hall or something, and any new software licenses as well. Okay, so we have worked through all of the questions for the registered manager, and this is the scenario complete page. And you can see that it's added all of our scores up for each of the questions, and then it's given a bit of a feedback below as well. So in security, it says that the breach is really quickly contained, been reported correctly, and the policies are updated to prevent further issues. So we've made really good decisions to give us a high security score just there. Time, we've scored a 9. Some delays will occur, but operations continue with manageable disruption. And for cost, the breach is costly due to the response costs, fines, legal fees, or reputational damage. We're not able to avoid these completely. Something has gone wrong. What we're looking to do is to try to prevent the reoccurrence. So there's cost to deal with what's happened, but there's also a bit of cost to prevent it happening again in the future. But that's not a really, really high score. That might become much more costly or even business ending if we hadn't have improved our security or reduced the amount of time to respond to the incident. So when we go to the next page, you can see that we've got a bit of a thank you for playing. Just a reminder that the tool is completely free to use and some suggestions about how you can use it within your organizations. We also have some additional links. We have the link to the Data Security and Protection Toolkit. Most people by now should be familiar with what it is. If you're not, please do read that through. And we have our comprehensive guidance hosted on the Digital Care Hub website that's accessible through that link. And you can reach out to us at any time for support to complete your toolkit if you need that. We've also got some resources that are specific to this scenario. So this one's about our data breaches, and this is the information that we host on our website as well. So if you don't have anything in place already, it's a really good starting point. There'll be some guidance there, and there might also be a template that you can use to personalize for your organization too. If you don't need either of those, you can click to return to the menu. you'll see that we now have a tick next to the register manager because we've completed that one. You can play through the scenario again, trying to get a better score, or if you want to click through and put some bad scores in to see the guidance there, that's absolutely fine. Or you can work through either the data security and protection lead scenario or the one for the carer as well. All done. Thanks, Dan.
Brilliant. Okay, I will reshare my slides now that we've worked through that. Hopefully, I won't display the wrong slides. There we go. Yes, that's through the cyber game demo. Really, yeah, and the final thing we're at really is whether we have any questions. Now, if I get up the Q&A, I noticed we also had a couple in chat. There were a couple. One was from Audra, who asked whether the system gives a downloadable certificate once a participant's completed. Interesting, Audra, we've done that previously for the e-learning because it does give them a sort of set of goals to work towards. What we didn't want this to feel like was too much like basically we wanted to be a learning exercise via stealth. So it doesn't provide a certificate to anyone afterwards to be able to say you've completed X, Y, Z. It's something that we can sort of use with staff to get them to train, but maybe not make them think that it's training, or at least we can pretend that it's not. I hope that answers that question. I don't know if you had anything to add to that as well, Claire.
No, I don't think so. We did have an internal discussion about whether we thought the certificate was appropriate or not, and the decision was ultimately made that we didn't want it to feel like a piece of learned work that people were doing the homework, so we made the choice not to.
Yeah, hello. We're always, and you'll see at the bottom of this slide here, we are really interested in any feedback. So stuff like that you think, well, actually, I would much prefer if we could have a certificate for that sort of thing. Send us an email at hello@digitalcarehub.co.uk with all of those sort of bits of feedback. We're always interested in what works, what doesn't work. Ultimately, we're for providers by providers. So whatever works best for you, that's what we're happy to support with. But when we looked at it, we thought if we're trying to err on the side of it being a fun game rather than kind of couched in quite dry terms, there you go, or just give us a thumbs up. Yeah, that was why we decided not to go for it, at least for this particular one. Taj had asked whether we have a recording of the session. Recording will be sent out afterwards along with all of these slides. Sharon has asked, is there a series of scenarios for each job role or just the one? And do answers always appear in the same order? I think there's only one scenario for each job role because we wanted to make sure each one was very customized to the job role itself. It was quite difficult actually for us to try and, I think at first we sort of decided we would have 3 scenarios and then 3 characters, but it's actually quite difficult to marry up some of them because a frontline carer doesn't have as much influence over ransomware, for example, as a data protection lead might.
And just to go to Sharon's second part of the question, do the answer options always appear in the same order? Yes, they do.
Yeah, we did originally. So they are randomized in terms of what the good options and the bad options are. They originally weren't, and we sort of figured, hang on a minute, all of the good options are option A. So we had the developer randomize those. But I think in the future, yeah, definitely, if we develop or redevelop something like this, I would quite like to have them randomized every time. What else have we got?
So maybe moving on to the Q&A questions, can players see the responses to the other options on the scenario pages? You can't unless you play back through the game. So as you might remember me saying that you can go through and select some bad answers, and there is some feedback on those as well, but you can't, whilst you're in one playthrough, you can't go back and select other options at that point in time.
Yeah, and some of that's intentional, so that when you're in a live incident, whether that's cyber incident or any other kind of disaster, you don't always have the time to say, "Oh, what was that decision we just made a week ago?" Let's really think that through and think through the consequences. Sometimes it has to be quite fast, intuitive decision making, and that's where that practice comes in. I'll start to tick
Julie's
some of these
asked,
ones off.
does the poll come included, so you can share your screen. It doesn't. It's something that we've created just for this launch webinar. I think it took Dan less than 5 minutes to create the poll. It's not something that's particularly technically difficult to do, but if you do need any support with that, we'd be happy to guide you through creating that. And Audra's asked,
Yeah.
does it give you a summary at the end of your answers and an overall score? So I don't know whether you remember, we had that page where it had the 3 coloured boxes and it had the 3 different
So this
factors
one.
across the middle of it. Thanks, Dan. So it's added up the scores for each of those 3 factors and giving you an overall score. And then it's giving you a bit of a wordy narrative piece underneath. It's just explaining whether you need to work a bit harder in that area or whether you've understood the assignment and you've done pretty well with balancing those needs.
Yep. And somebody else also asked, David in the chat, you said earlier about playing as an individual or a team. Yeah, so essentially what we would advocate for, if I can just find the right slide, is when you're on this sort of slide where you can see all 4 options, have that discussion as a team, have it up on whether it's on a projector, on a whiteboard, something similar. And it depends how big the team is you're working with, I suppose. You could have it on a laptop or a tablet with you. It works on phone just fine, so you can also have it equipped on phone and send everyone the link. I would use those to prompt those discussions. So not just the what would you do, but okay, we've picked this decision either as a group or individually. Why have we picked that decision? What's the feedback it's given us? And as well as discussing, would that feedback be applicable to our organization? And we've tried to write this in a way that it's not specific to a size or type. It doesn't sort of differentiate between home care and care home, for example. And you might want to have a discussion actually about, well, what do we do there? What does our organization do in that particular instance? It's good to use it as a discussion prompter in a team meeting or a supervision or that sort of thing.
Then David's asked about playing as an individual, as a team. You can just have hands up. If you have a room full of people, you could just ask for a show of hands for A, B, C, and D, or you can set up a bit of a poll like we did and ask people to vote on it. So different ways that you can make it into a team exercise, or just ask people to play through it, maybe compare the scores at the end between each other. Whatever you think is going to work best for your staff.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. I'll give you guys another minute or so and see if you've got any more questions to pop in the chat or the Q&A. But if not, I think we've finished 10 minutes early, so you can go and grab a cup of tea or deal with whatever needs to be dealing with next. I'll give you 30 seconds or so before. Oh, actually, the final thing I should do, apologies, is that ending slide does also have a poll that we can launch on there, just to see if it was what you thought. Feel free to be completely honest, because again, we use all of this feedback to improve everything we do. Feedback on the ways that we present things, or whether this is useful to you or not, as a resource.
David's asked a question, will it be updated at any point to include different scenarios? So this was a piece of work that was funded by the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. And this was what we felt was good as a starting point. We need to kind of assess whether this is something that's well received, if we're getting a lot of people looking at it. If we find that it's really popular, then we will likely create more scenarios. But we also need to do that assessment first and see whether actually 3 is enough or whether people want different types of questions. So we're certainly open to developing it further, but we want to do a bit of feedback assessment first.
Yeah, and please do put any of that in the question 4 in that feedback poll is around any specific comments. If there's any suggestions you have, please do pop them in there, or pop us an email at the hello@digitalcarehub.co.uk. We always do like to take feedback. I think it's the most important thing for us, really, is to take feedback from the sector, distill that down and say, okay, you said you wanted X, here's X. This had been something that people had commented on when doing the e-learning, that actually it's a lot easier to have cybersecurity and data protection in a game format rather than something that's quite dry. So this was where that came from. But yeah, Claire's exactly right. This is it's more advanced than a prototype, but this is our first sort of shot at this sort of thing. So if it is something the sector thinks, oh god, this is really useful, sure, we can do more of it. Paul's also asked whether we could share a link to the game. Claire, I don't know if you've still got the link up, if you'd be able to copy it into
I'm just
chat.
doing it. It came up with like a really, really long version. So I'm just trying to get a slightly shorter one that's going to be a bit more user friendly. Just give me a moment.
Maybe I'll close the poll. Thank you guys for all of your wonderful feedback. It's always helpful.
Okay, we will be sharing a shorter version than that in the future via our networks. But if you want to just direct click on that, that will take you to the starting page for the game.
See if I can get this shorter link. There we go. I wonder if that works. Yes,
that's better.
That hopefully might work.
Thanks,
yeah,
Dan.
and if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll be able to see it. Fantastic. Okay, well, it looks like we haven't got any more questions. We've still got a couple of minutes left for people, so we'll let you all go. Thank you for sitting and listening to us. Thank you for kind of sitting through the context and then going through the game. Hopefully, it's a useful resource for you, but do let us know either way. We're always happy to hear from you guys. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day.